Wait, what about weird?
Hi, I'm Echo.
And I'm Elena.
And this is What About Weird, a podcast about all things weird from cryptids and aliens to strange science and unhinged history. And today, even though it's after Halloween, I am year-round in spooky season, so we're going to be talking about the murder at Hex Hollow. And I'm going to start a little bit about talking about, and I looked up how to pronounce it. I'm so sorry. Like, I know it's like Brauha, but there's also, like, you could say, I think you can also say it like Brauhery, because some
Brewery?
forms, yeah. Like, I've heard some people say it like as Bruja, and some people say it as Brauha. And then there's
Just join me in not
like,
knowing how to say anything.
There's also a form that has an R in it that's like Brauhery. So I'm really sorry if I pronounce this wrong, or if I get like, because this is someone's culture, and if I get any of it wrong and you happen to like practice that, feel free to correct me. I like read a whole bunch of sources, but you never know what stuff is going to be right and what stuff is going to be wrong. And I try and do like credible research, but the internet is the internet. They're like, here's this .gov government website. Everything on here is credible, and then it's just all fucking lies.
And misspellings.
Yeah, it's not great. You never know if the information you're getting is like 100% true. But I listened to podcasts and I did read specific like book that is used for Brauha, like their like spells and stuff. Well, not really like spells, more like prayers and stuff.
You read their text.
Yeah.
Religious texts and stuff.
So when you hear the term hex or witch master, you might think of one of
D&D.
That, or you might think of one of the many pagan religions. And of course, pagan is simply a term for like most religions that are not the common recognized religion within an area. So we see the term being used in Christian Latin to mean the word heathen, or someone who doesn't believe in Christ. And so obviously, like, yeah, the term heathen just means like you don't believe in Christ, but it's got such a negative connotation that comes with it. And so our world really began to deem pagans of people of vastly different religions, from Norse mythology to Wicca to any religion practiced by the indigenous people.
You mean Norse? You said
That's what I
North. Same thing. Either way you said it, it is correct.
I swear to God I said Norse. I'm reading it off of the page, so I don't know why I would have said North.
Because speech impediment. You've been around me too much lately.
I just, like, it's hard to talk for this long. Like, I don't understand how people
You've been
do
talking for 5 minutes.
We've been talking all day, every day for a fucking week now. I'm not used to talking this much. I hide in my room and I stay silent for like 10 hours a day.
That's valid. Same.
Anyway, so these are like vastly different cultures and religions, but we basically labeled all of them as pagan. And so oftentimes what happens is these religious practices lose their real name, simply dubbed as Germanic paganism, neo-pagan, eclectic pagan, etc. We're just like looping it in as like certain types of pagan instead of calling it what it really is and what the people who practice it refer to it as. But that's like kind of a little bit of a tangent because we're not necessarily going to be talking about pagans in this episode, because when you hear the term Hexenmeister, which we've kind of termed to mean witch master, you may be quick to assume that it is one of the many religions that we have deemed pagan. But in fact, a Hexenmeister is part of, I have Brauhery down, but also like Brauha, which is a folk practice rooted in Christianity that started in the 1700s Pennsylvania Dutch. In English, it is also called powwow. I think we just stole that from the indigenous people. I don't know why we call it powwow, but we do.
We're really good at stealing stuff.
Yeah. So I'm not sure if that's a term that they brought over or a term that we just decided to call it because we were like, hey, it's got some folk magic in it. That's what the natives do, so we're just gonna call it powwow.
If we don't understand it, we're gonna lump it all together.
So,
yay.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that's what happened, but it seems coded for what we do here. So this practice includes a range of healing rituals used primarily for treating ailments in humans, livestock, and crops, as well as securing physical and spiritual protection and other boons. Along with folk plant medicine, there are 2 traditional healing practices among the Pennsylvania Dutch, although some research consider them to be one and the same. A Hexenmeister is a practitioner of Brauha, which focuses on healing, protection, and good fortune through Christian-based spells. Though a Hexenmeister is often dubbed a witch, a sorcerer, or a wizard, since the term hex, obviously, like, we attribute hex with witches. It's actually a practice that spans these terms, as it combines elements of Swiss-German folk traditions, European grimoires, and Christian beliefs. Although it doesn't seem like Christianity and magic mix, some even say Jesus was accused of being a witch. Of course, Hexenmeisters are not exactly witches, but are supposed to be a reactionary force against evil witches and dark magic.
I just want to point out that if one thing we learned in the Satanic Panic episode is that you can call anyone anything if you don't give a shit about them.
Exactly.
And you're scared.
Yeah, exactly. And if you don't make a chance to actually get to know them and see what they believe in, and you just dub them.
Learning about other people is scary and requires effort. I say no.
Yeah. So some that practice this describe each spell, written, spoken, or otherwise, as a type of prayer to God to provide luck, health, and protection against evil. In a forested section of York County, Pennsylvania, 1928, lies a 2-story house on a piece of land known as Rehmeyer's Hollow, owned by a 60-year-old Nelson Rehmeyer, who lived alone. Although he kept to himself, people in the town knew him to be kind and good-natured, but maybe a little eclectic.
So, me.
Basically.
And you.
I was reading this and I was like, wow, this is so us.
Is this me in a past life?
One thing that made him stand out from other people in the town was his collection of socialist literature, and on the tail end of the Russian Revolution, this kind of thinking was looked in a very negative light. And although his wife and their 2 children had moved into a house a mile down the road, leaving him at the hollow by himself, they never formally divorced and still kept in touch, another thing the townspeople found odd. The thing that may have been the most misunderstanding and odd about Nelson was he was a practitioner of folk magic, a Hexenmeister. Using prayer, charms, rituals, and amulets, Nelson would heal, protect, and bless, and many of Pennsylvania Dutch community would put as much faith in their Hexenmeister as they would their actual medical doctor. A Hexenmeister could help out with just about any issues you could think of. Here are just a few items a Hexenmeister might be able to help you out with: hysterics, bleeding, colic, injuries, attaching a dog to a person, searching for ore or iron.
What do you mean by attaching a dog to a person? Like
making that dog attached to you. Like man's best friend.
Bonding. Okay, yeah. I was like, what Frankenstein experiments is he doing? Gotcha.
Obtaining this which is desired, catching fish, preventing wickedness or maliciousness, broken glass, fits or convulsions, consumption, snake bites, make cattle return home, increase growth of wool, prevent gun barrels from rusting, immobilizing a thief, etc.
I already think I know where this is going, and I know nothing about this. I'm going to take a guess, just so it's on the record. This guy's going to get accused of, like, murder or some horrific crimes, and then it's going to be all turned on him because he is the weird person in town, even though he's helpful, and then it's probably going to turn against the townspeople.
If you want a full list of their actual charms or prayers, you can find a copy of The Long Lost Friend and I believe this is by John George Hoffman. Sometimes it was just the creation of a charm or a prayer. Other times it was doing something like fixing a toothache by prodding the tooth with a needle until it bleeds, soaking thread in the blood, and sewing said thread into the base of an apple tree. While many might think this is a silly, harmless superstition, these practices are closely tied to the Hexenmeister's faith and belief in God, and their faith is part of what they believe makes their remedies work.
This sounds a lot like Appalachian granny magic to me.
A lot of that, I believe, also comes from, like, Swiss German folk traditions, so...
And, like, Old Irish.
Yeah.
That would make sense. That makes sense, because a lot of this sounds like stuff I heard growing up from the old mountain people and stuff.
Exactly. Yeah, it's because it's coming from like those traditional cultures that we've brought back here, and they're just like either melded with Christianity when they come here to the United States, or maybe like just melded with other religions or formed into their own things, so they carry like hints of each other or like even a lot of similarities, but they're not quite the same thing, which is just really interesting.
Yeah, and there's like voodoo is sort of that way. There's a lot of like American folk religions that are kind of the same thing, and it's like very Christian based, and if you're not part of that religion or part of that like group, you're like, that's witchcraft, and everyone in it is like, no, it's not witchcraft, don't call it witchcraft, it's just granny helping heal you, you know?
Yeah, exactly, that's so right. So the people who practice this believe there is a big difference between a hexenmeister and a witch. A hexenmeister protects and heals, while a witch means to do harm. Spells of the hexenmeister often exist to combat those of the witch, to undo any evil that may have been done. Even though most in the community believed Nelson was a good man, there were a few who believed he may not always be using his powers for good. A man named John Blymeyer had a meeting with a powerful hexenmeister in the area, a woman named Emma Knopp, nicknamed the River Witch of Marietta. John believed he was being hexed by someone and asked her to tell him who was the cause of his issues. John had previously been diagnosed with a nervous disease, but today we might consider his symptoms to be those of depression and anxiety.
Again, with the people not understanding mental health.
It's the 1920s. Like, they literally, this is when they still called women hysterics, so.
That's fair.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so much stuff that goes into, like, a big part of the paranormal that heavily overlaps with mental health stuff.
Yeah, and
this is why I want to do a weird talk on, like, mental health and the paranormal, because it's just, like, they are so buddy-buddy.
Yeah, and a lot of these are. It's just crazy. And I'm sure there's still things that we do today that we don't understand, that we're like, that's this thing. And then, like, 100 years in the future, we're going to be like, wow, can you believe in 2020 they thought that?
Yeah. If being depressed and anxious is the symptom of a witch, then my work is run by a bunch of witches.
Well, John Blymeyer isn't a witch. He thinks he's been cursed or, like, hexed.
That's what I'm saying. The cause of his depression and anxiety is a witch. The cause of mine is...
Oh, there are witches at work.
Yes.
I understand. Okay.
And my family.
So, John was constantly obsessed and worried about his health. He had been in and out of psychiatric hospitals, constantly receiving electric treatments. He visited folk healers often. Medical professionals at the time also believe he suffered from delusions. Maybe this was due to his belief in hexenmeisters and magic. Maybe he actually suffered these delusions.
This sounds like the, have you heard of Wendigo psychosis? Or it kind of reminds me of that, or of, like, what's it called? Clinical lycanthropy. There's a whole bunch of things where it's like your beliefs feed into your mental illness and it just amplifies.
Yeah.
Like, there's stuff with demonic possession as well, of you believe that, like, the only thing that'll help you is an exorcism. Thank you.
Exorcism. Well, you were, like, enunciating
I was struggling, but
yeah,
that's kind of what that makes me think of.
It is definitely, like, it is probably feeding a little bit into what's wrong with him. After a particularly bad stay at a mental institute, John escaped, though it's not known how. And while on the run, he stopped in to say goodbye to his wife, attempting to murder her, but he ended up failing. I don't know, like,
Bye,
what exactly
I love
happened,
you. Stab.
But she did say that, like, he tried to kill her, and then she ended up getting out of it, and then he just continued on the run. He was later found and arrested and spent 3 to 4 months in jail. And then after he got out, he started going by a pseudonym. I don't know what that pseudonym is, but obviously he didn't really want to be known as John Blymeyer anymore because of all the crazy shit he had done.
John Blymeyer, but it was spelled with a Y and now it's spelled with an I.
Yeah. His ailments just seemed to get worse and worse. He wasn't eating, he wasn't sleeping well, and then 2 of his 3 children ended up passing away. And he spent months feeling like surely he had been cursed or bewitched. This is when he started going to Hexenmeister after Hexenmeister, who all confirmed this belief. Finally, when he came to Emma Knopp, she gave him a $1 bill and said to him to look at the face on the $1 bill. Then when he looks at the palm of his hand, a different face will appear and he will see who is the one bewitching him. And this is when he sees the face of Nelson Rehmeyer. So now John has not only confirmed that he's been bewitched, but he has been given the identity of the one who is bewitching him. The only reason John knew Nelson in the first place is because he was one of the many Hexenmeisters John had gone to over the years. And John had also helped Nelson pick potatoes on his farm and had known him for over 20 years since John was a little boy.
Oh no, is Nelson gonna get killed because this guy already has violent tendencies and now he's like, you're hexing me?
You're just gonna have to wait.
I like guessing, okay? Let me guess.
At some point, I'm going to say it. Emma Knopp gave John very specific instructions on how to break this hex. Get a lock of Nelson's hair and bury it in the ground 6 to 8 feet deep. Or find Nelson's copy of Long Lost Friend, the Book of Spells and Prayers for Braha, and burn it. Around this time, John met a factory worker named Milton Hess, who complained to John that he had a lot of problems with his farm and his family members kept getting ill. Milton told John that he believed his sister must have paid a witch to hex him. And with his farm being close to Rehmeyer's Hollow, John could only assume Milton had also been bewitched by Nelson. John was sure that if they both took a lock of Nelson's hair to bury and burned the copy of Long Lost Friend together, they would kill 2 birds with 1 stone and be free of their troubles. John convinced Milton that he was a powerful Hexenmeister and told Milton that he could break the spell on him and his family if Milton would be willing to follow his plan and do as he says. So on November 26th, John and one of his farmhands make a trip over to Nelson's. All he had to do was get a lock of hair in the book and get out, but worried that since Nelson was larger than him, even with 2 of them together, they wouldn't be able to overpower Nelson and take these items. John goes to Milton and tells him that basically he needs one of his strongest, oldest sons to help him break the curse. Milton agrees and decides to send his 17-year-old son Wilbur Hess along with John. In the farmhand, I'm just referring to him as a farmhand because his name is John Curry, and there's going to be John and John.
Every Tom, Dick, and Harry is named John?
Like, I am probably just going to either call him Curry or I'm just going to refer to him as the farmhand. But Milton sends his 17-year-old son Wilbur with John and then John's farmhand Curry to go back over to Nelson's home. And they basically told Wilbur, who really didn't want to go in the first place.
Is the first guy just like sitting out of this? He's just like, he convinced this other guy to do his dirty work and is like, hey, you go do this to take care of this.
No, like John is doing it, but he told Milton that he needed to send his 17-year-old son with them in case they needed 3 people to overpower
There's too
Nelson.
many. I'm getting a little confused with all the Johns and the white man names.
I know.
So I'm just like, wait, who's going, who's not? So
John
first guy.
Rehmeyer is the guy who's escaped the psychiatric institutes. He's the one that is like the start of all of this. And then his farmhand Curry is a 14-year-old kid who he decides to like basically recruit to this, because when you have a farmhand at this time, they basically like are at your beck and call.
Sacrifices, yay!
And then John meets Milton and discovers that Milton's family has been having a ton of problems. And Milton confides in John that he thinks his sister has paid a witch to put a hex on him. And so John is like, oh, Nelson Rehmeyer must also be the one putting a hex on you because you live near here. Send me your strongest son to help me like overpower this witch so we can get his hair and his copy of like his Braha text.
Okay, so farmhand is the first guys, and then the son is the second guys.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. And they're all going to beat this man up.
Yeah, they're
basically
they're trying to get 2 locks of his hair to bury.
and his book.
And his book. So late Tuesday night, they arrive at Nelson's home again. He kindly invites them inside, and then John lunges at Nelson, pushing him to the ground. John and his young farmhand begin beating Nelson with pieces of wood as Milton's son Wilbur tells them to stop.
I'm picturing them like beating him with, I'm sure it's probably big sticks, but I think it's so much funnier if it's like tiny little
pieces of wood.
Yeah, little pieces of wood, like hand-sized kindling. They're just beating him upside the head, just thwap, 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 thwap. And the son's asking him to stop because it's just embarrassing, not because they're hurting him.
Nelson is begging them to stop. He doesn't know why they're there, so he's trying to like hand them money and his pocketbook, thinking that they're trying to rob him. John then bashes Nelson over the head with a chair, breaking it into pieces. They tied Nelson up, and then they tie a rope around his neck and pull until it seems like he can't breathe anymore. Wilbur has hit John on the head, I believe, once with a piece of wood, just because he was scared, but otherwise he's pretty much yelling at them to just grab the hair so they can leave. Wilbur does not want any more harm to come to this man. But John and John's farmhand, Curry, are just fucking wailing into this guy.
I feel like they were just looking for a reason to beat up anybody.
Pretty much. John would later testify that he thought the hair was too bloody at this point to bury it, so it might not work anymore. Plus, surely the hex would be broken if Nelson was dead, and the man will be buried and his hair will be buried along with him. So poor Wilbur had gone as service to his family, only to now be an accomplice to murder because they had basically like beaten and strangled Nelson to death. John wipes fingerprints off of all of the surfaces, and they attempted to set fire to the house by covering Nelson's body in straw and lantern oil and lighting a match and engulfing the body in flames.
Oh, so they're just fully skipping the burial of stuff. They're just like, we'll burn it. Hopefully the book is in here and they'll burn it with it and we'll call it a day.
Yeah, exactly. They're trying to burn the whole house down so they can make sure the copy of Long Lost Friend gets burned, and it will also get rid of all of the evidence of their crimes. And then obviously, like, they're thinking, well, when they find Nelson's body, they're going to bury him in the ground. His hair's on his head. Problem solved. And now he can't place a hex on anyone else.
You'd think it would be, they would have to bury him himself, because that's usually how a lot of these things go, is like you have to do stuff yourself with, or have someone who is doing it with the intention to break a curse or do whatever. Like,
right.
You know, and it couldn't just be like them burying him for a funeral because there's no intention behind that. But I don't know.
And he probably misinterpreted what Emma Knopp told him anyway, because he's not actually a Hexenmeister.
Yeah,
like,
and he's also,
he doesn't know.
He's also just beating people up.
Yeah.
So I hope that Wilbur, or whatever his name is, the son that was just like, I don't want to be here, I hope he reports him, because this poor guy just got roped into it.
Yeah.
Same with the farmhand. But the farmhand is like going at it.
I know, but he's also 14.
He's 14, but it's like his master, or whatever you want to call it, is like he's watching him beat someone up, and he's like, oh, I guess I have to beat him up or else I'm gonna get beat up.
And I also don't know this kid's situation either. Like, I don't know why he's this man's farmhand, or like how that even came about, but
I just feel bad for Wilbur at this point.
Yeah, pretty bad. So in the early morning of November 1928, a farmer by the name of David Vanover heard animals crying out as if in pain, coming from Rehmeyer's Hollow. Nelson was never known to neglect his animals, so this was unusual for his animals to be in distress for so long without him going to check on them and solve whatever issue was occurring. So David decided he better go check on his neighbor. And when David got onto the property, he noticed the animals were crying out from hunger as they hadn't been fed in nearly 2 days. There was no sign of Nelson anywhere on the property. David decided to go into the house to investigate further, but when he entered, he was met with the putrid smell of burning meat. On the ground before him was a figure covered in straw and blankets, blackened from flames, but not enough that he couldn't recognize the man. It was Nelson.
So these guys are just, they're bad at dealing with their mental health. They're just looking for a reason to fight, and apparently they can't even commit arson right.
No. So Nelson lay face down on the floor with his legs twisted up behind his head and almost seemed like they had been bound together. Broken pieces of chair were scattered across the kitchen, some of them covered in blood, and blood was still spattered all over a few of the walls. John's plan had failed as the house was still standing and nothing in the house had been burned aside from Nelson's body, leaving much of the evidence of their crime behind. Nelson's body was also not burned so badly that they couldn't see the wounds that had occurred before his death. The fire had been strong enough to burn a hole in the floorboards 2 feet across under the lower half of Nelson's body, but the flames had died out quickly and didn't spread past that. Many say this is because Hexameisters have spells to protect against fire, and it was known that Nelson had protected his property against flames. The police came knocking at the Hess farm, and Wilbur's mother, not knowing her son had anything to hide, went ahead and told police that Wilbur, John, and Curry, John's farmhand, had all gone to Nelson's the previous night, and thus all of them were arrested. All 3 ended up confessing to the murder. Even though the prosecution had a confession and plenty of evidence, they saw the murder of a man for being a witch as crazy and akin to what happened during the witch trials. And a lot of people think that they were embarrassed that these beliefs still existed within these communities. So they attempted to leave everything about witches out of the trial.
Well, I mean, that's good. At least they're still convicting these guys of murder.
Yeah,
but like,
so they're
poor
trying
Wilbur.
to prove that it's a robbery gone wrong instead. However, the first day of the trial, one of the witnesses mentions that John said he got the witch. And now they have to mention witches because it's the first day of the trial, and one of the witnesses is like, oh yeah, John did it because Nelson was a witch.
I guess.
And then the newspapers like immediately caught on to this.
That's a tricky bit because then it's like, if you're like, well, believing in witches is crazy, then that means he could get off on an insanity plea.
Yeah, and so they do kind of pivot at this point and try to go that way because they're like, well, witch has been mentioned. This dude is just fucking crazy because he believes in witches. But at this point, like, newspapers catch on to it and they started printing the story like wildfire. Misunderstanding Brauhaut altogether. They reported that a witch had been murdered and they basically started calling it Hex Hollow instead of Rehmeyer's Hollow. Near the end of the court hearing, John said he still didn't think that he had done anything wrong, as after Nelson's death, he was finally able to eat, sleep, and think normally again. He believed the spell on him was finally broken. John was found guilty of first-degree murder and was given life in prison, and his farmhand, who was only 14 years old, was also found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life. Wilbur,
did he get any treatment for his mental health or no? Or they just like,
this time. They
oh
just
yeah,
send you
you're
to
right.
Jail, yeah.
I mean,
at least he's locked up.
At least he's locked up, but it's like, he committed murder, so he should be locked up, but also he has severe mental illness, so he should be treated for that, but also it's the 20s, so what do you want?
Yeah, exactly.
They didn't even treat people's mental health in the 80s with the satanic panic, so the bar is at the ground.
Mm-hmm. So Wilbur, who had just turned 18 during the trial, was convicted of second-degree murder and given a sentence of 10 to 20 years, of which I believe he served 10 of, and under like the pretense that he would join the military after. So they basically let him out after 10 years, and they were like,
they're like, you like murdering people? I got an idea for you. Have we got a job for you? 10 years later, he would have been
28.
Yeah, he would have been 28, and that would have been, unless my timeline's getting screwed up, like the middle of the Second World War, like the beginning of it, right?
Yeah, it would have been 1938. So I guess maybe they needed people for the military really bad. They were like, come on out of jail and join up, boy.
Yeah.
The amount of press was pretty bad and very inaccurate to the Pennsylvania Dutch beliefs. They basically pushed Hexameisters further into the shadows and made their practices even more rare after all of this became publicized. And ever since, Rehmeyer's Hollow, now deemed Hex Hollow, has been a sort of rite of passage to teenagers in this area. On Halloween night, it's said the hollow becomes a portal to hell at night, cursed by the horrors that happened nearly 100 years ago. Everything in the house is nearly the same as it was the day it became a portal to hell, on the fateful night of November 28th. Wooden chairs collect dust, shelves are riddled with spider webs, and old tonics and potions sit in the kitchen. The teenagers, when they go there as their rite of passage to kind of see if they can find the portal to hell, experience Hex Hollow, they can even go in the building and see the burns in the flooring where Nelson's body was burned. And that is all I have on the murder at Hex Hollow.
Interesting. Yeah, that's kind of interesting. It makes... So whenever something was sort of a whole ordeal, my grandfather would call it a brouhaha.
Yeah.
And it's like this kind, yeah. And he's very German, like German American, not Pennsylvania Dutch, but like grew up in a like little German town, and that is kind of interesting that it's because for some reason I never connected the two, because I knew about brewery and I had heard that phrase, but I just for some reason never connected them.
Right. There were probably times in my life where I was like insensitive to religion because I just didn't grow up that way.
Yeah, and there's probably times I'm insensitive to stuff for the same reasons, or just ignorant of stuff.
Yeah, which happens, but as long as you're trying to be like a better person and understand and you're open to constructive criticism, like there you go.
Yeah.
So thank you for listening. If you liked it, please rate the podcast and share it with the weird people in your life. Follow us on Instagram at whataboutweird.pod, where we often share pictures related to the episodes. We are also on Blue Sky at whataboutweirdpod. And if you have any topic suggestions or personal weird stories, please DM us or email us at whataboutweirdpod@gmail.com.
And always remember
to ask about the weird.
Bye for now.